evening, everybody, and welcome back to AperiPolitics. In this Semana de Fuego, we are going to mainly talk about what is happening in Venezuela.
And just to be fair, this episode has been recorded on August 10th, while it will be published on August 12th, so anything that will happen in those 2 days will be discussed next week.
Well, that said, let's get right into the news.
As already previously mentioned, there have been elections in Venezuela, and they went horribly.
Yeah.
In fact, on the 28th of July, that's when the elections happened, the data shows how, in reality, Edmundo Gonzalez, after Maria Corina Machado was barred from the elections by the government, actually won. However, Maduro really and wholeheartedly refuses to accept this defeat, declaring he won 51.2% according to his numbers. I stress his, because in fact, all around the world there has been criticism from Venezuelans and non-Venezuelans. Plus, those living inside Venezuela are protesting, and these protests are also fermented by Maria Corina.
Well, Ale, I think it is important for our audience to give a sort of contextualization to what is happening in Venezuela, since this is not a new phenomenon. We know that Venezuela is under a very difficult situation since Chavez took the power back before the start of the new century. Under Maduro, who was his successor after Chavez died. We have in Venezuela the highest violence rate. The Bolivar, which is the currency of Venezuela, was devalued to nothing, basically. I think it was devalued actually 4 times by Maduro. And now the minimum wage in Venezuela is, according to data I found, 1.2 million bolivar, which is just $1 in the United States. So it's incredibly limited as a wage. And not to mention inflation. Inflation is at incredible levels. Now it's a little bit better since it is more or less, according to Statista, to 100%. And it is foreseen to be 150% next year. But we remember also in 2018, when the last elections took place, it reached a level of 63,000% more or less, which is absolutely flabbergasting, but in a negative sense, actually. So Venezuela is not new to such violence, such repression from the leader, from the dictator Maduro, and to such socioeconomic crisis. Remember in the last elections of 2018, when Maduro again was defeated, but he did not accept the defeat. Guaido, who was the president of the parliament at the time, was recognized as the president ad interim by many countries in the world, and he took the place of president at interim according to the constitution, actually, so not like randomly. We know the situation was already pretty difficult at the time, because as we have seen, Maria Corina Machado and Corina Yaris barred from the elections. Well, also in 2018, the opposition leaders were arrested and they could not participate in the elections. So again, Maduro selected, we can say, the one he thought he could beat, or he could just go against, as he's doing right now with Edmundo Gonzalez, as he's done right now with Edmundo Gonzalez. Back in 2018, again, Maduro received the support of China, Russia, and other countries. And he started controlling every aspect of the military, the civil militia, the National Guard, the National Oil Company, and also the Supreme Court was made of his appointees. Reason why in the past elections he did not receive any kind of punishment, penalty, or judgment against him by the Supreme Court, because, I mean, the members were his appointees. And just to conclude this brief contextualization, I advise people to go and look at some videos, news about the past of Venezuela, also to know the story of Venezuela. It is important to mention some indexes, like, for example, the Freedom Index by Freedom House, where Venezuela is 178th out of 210 countries considered by Freedom House, with very low political rights and a little bit better in civic liberties, but actually it is pretty bad also on that side, not to mention the corruption index, the prosperity index by Legatum, which is a society doing this kind of indexes. It is the worst of Latin America in terms of perception of electoral integrity. It is the worst in Latin America, again, in terms of quality of government, and also in terms of clientelism. So this is just to say that what is Venezuela and Venezuelans, unfortunately, are experiencing right now is something already seen in the Venezuelan context.
Perfect. So now we can actually talk about Venezuela and have three different takes: domestic, regional, and international. Let's start with domestic. I have seen how the elected 76% versus the 30% of Maduro is more or less what has been the real election polls. Sorry, the real election results. However, apparently, I don't know if you know, but Maduro promised to show las actas electorales, so the results that he has, within 48 hours. Problem is, he never did that. So what do you think?
Yeah, I've read about that. I also understood that technically presenting the results within 48 hours is what he's expected to do according to the Constitution. So basically, right now he's breaching the Constitution, also because today is the 10th, so 12 days has passed from the more than 12 days has passed from the election. So yeah, as you said, 67% is the real number of votes in favor of Edmundo Gonzalez. The opposition was able to provide data about the votes. Actually, I think just a couple of hours after the end of the elections, and you can see them on the website resultadosconvenezuela.com. So I feel like Maria Corina Machado, his team, Corina Llores, Edmundo Gonzalez have studied each single detail to defeat, for this time for real, Maduro, and differently from the other candidates in the past who were never able to defeat the dictator. And actually, it is sad, in juxtaposition, it is very sad how Maduro is responding to this, we can say, pieces of evidence, to the pacific protests of people on the streets with a harsh repression, accusing the opposition to be terrorists, capturing them, bringing them to prison, and this is actually something which does not happen in a democracy. I don't know if you heard that right now Maduro has promoted two colonels to the highest grade with total impunity and with the highest salary possible to be, we can say, the masters of torture for the government, meaning torturing all the political oppositors or all the enemies of the government, all the civilians protesting too much who are arrested and brought to a center called El Helicoide. And these two are Alexander Granco and Nairobi O'Connor Jackson. Nairobi O'Connor Jackson is just expert in not leaving the marks of torture on the body of victims, whereas Alexander Granco is someone who is considered to have violated multiple times human rights according to International Criminal Court. He has been sanctioned by the United States and the European Union in 2019 and is a real expert of torture. Did you know that?
Well, now I do. I also brought up a fact just to touch on a point you mentioned, which is that apparently 2,229 people have been captured, and what Maduro says about these people is that they're terrorists, as you said earlier. So, and he also stressed that there will be a bloodbath and a fratricidal civil war if they continue with the protest, etc. So I believe there is a possibility for a civil war to happen in Venezuela. If that happens, maybe, and here we can transition to the regional aspect. But I believe if there is a civil war, then other countries could intervene. Not will, but could. There's a possibility. So I want to ask you, out of 10, how much do you think there's a possibility of a civil war?
I mean, I'd say honestly a 5 or a 6 because it is still possible according to me, but it is like almost the worst case scenario, meaning that there are other possibilities. As I said before, Maduro is risking so much with the International Criminal Court, because we remember that Venezuela ratified the Rome Statute, so Maduro could be arrested if the ICC issues an international arrest warrant. And so I say that another hypothetical scenario is that Maduro now is contracting with the International Criminal Court to result immune from this process, to leave the government, but result immune, he and his family, to be exiled in a place safe, while all the rest of his team and his closest, we can say, military members, etc., will be arrested. So I think he's contracting more on that, and I think that could be a more possible scenario than a civil war. I say that because technically Edmundo Gonzalez now is the president recognized already by many countries, which means that he could ask a foreign military intervention to Venezuela and to destitute Maduro officially. So I'd say that scenario may occur before a civil war. I think that is way more possible than a civil war. And the thing is that right now Maduro is avoiding to talk, to express himself, to divulgate informations, not to give, we can say, a sort of orientation to enemies, to foreign countries, and to Edmundo Gonzalez. And how he's doing that? Well, he has blocked for 10 days X, the platform X of Elon Musk, where he before blocked Elon Musk, before Elon Musk, actually, he's the owner of X, unlocked himself. And then I think he also wants to block TikTok, Instagram, and WhatsApp, because he sees them as the root cause of all the protests and how people are getting to know the information about the opposition and the official votes. So I'd say a civil war is a 5, 6 out of 10 possible situation because of these limitations he's kind of imposing. So it's not easy to reach that point.
Interesting. So let me follow up on this. Let me ask you another question, then we can transition to the other section. I also think 5 is a good rating, but we have to consider something. He is very much fomenting a new wave of violence because, as he said, he's blocking socials, WhatsApp, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, everything. He can't really do that. Well, he can, but not really. So that makes people angrier. Then we have the army who sides with him and is ready to fight for him. Once again, that is another... This really reminds me of the fourth turning of the other episode, but much worse. So we have these two factors which are incredibly damaging for Venezuela, plus the inflation, plus people already angry from the previous years. There might be even a 6 or a 7 if things go south, with Maduro going even harder on his internal policies. So let me ask you a quick question. Do you think he wants a civil war? If you were Maduro, strategically, would you want a civil war? So you let the place burn and then you contract the ICC, you go away and no one can do anything to you? Or you don't want a civil war?
I'd say that depends on how much sure he is of having support of the military, of having support also, I'd say, of Russia, China, Iran, Cuba. So everything depends on how safe Maduro feels. Because, as you said, army pledged allegiance to Maduro's. They said that they will defend him. But we have witnessed that many times, also under the Nazi regime. And that at a certain point, the conscience of soldiers will start to cede, to fail, because soldiers are not able for a long time to kill civilians, to torture civilians, knowing that they are innocent. So I think that soldiers in this case, mental stability will play a great role. And if the opposition is able to convince the soldiers, to make the soldiers fail in keeping mentally stable, for sure that means that Maduro does not have the support of at least one part of the army anymore. and so it will not feel enough safe to start a civil war. I mean, a kind of civil war is already happening because, as we said, there are the protesters across the streets. Maduro takes them, he brings to the helicoide, tortures them. So it's a kind of civil war already starting. Apart from the fact that people on the street are pacific, they do not have weapons, or at least the majority. So I don't know. I think Maria Corina Machado and his entire entourage started with great determination and according to each single detail the plan for winning this election for real and removing Maduro from power. And this has been witnessed also by the message she has published, I think it was more or less 3 or 4 days ago, on her Instagram page and also on her X page, where she said that Edmundo Gonzalez is the president and the process is irreversible. She mentioned 3 key steps, 3 key characteristics actually of this sort of, if we want to say that as a revolution, which are union and firmness, invincibility, perseverance, and lastly, trust and faith. And she concluded the message with something which is, I'd say, a hint to what is going to happen in the next days, saying, and I quote, "An organizational break is needed to pursue greater goals and obtain the legitimate power," end quote. So I think that this last part of the message lets us understand that they are preparing something which could be, as I said before, asking for a foreign military intervention, giving other evidences to the International Criminal Court so that they can condemn Maduro, which will make Maduro's regime fall.
Okay. Now moving on to the regional aspect. Well, Milei is a bombastic character, and I quote, "Argentina will now recognize another fraud and hopes that this time the armed forces will defend democracy and popular will," which, by the way, I doubt. The army usually stays with the dictator, but hopefully not this time. So what is he saying implicitly? He's implicitly, or actually quite strongly implying that he might intervene if things go very bloody. Then there's Colombia, with Gustavo Petro, who's negotiating with the government. And then we have Brazil with Lula, who wants to...
Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
I would like to remind that Gustavo Petro is negotiating with Maduro to let him leave the government and grant democracy to Venezuela.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Just because he fears that many Venezuelans will escape actually to Colombia, as happened in 2018 when around 1 million Venezuelans escaped to Colombia. And Gustavo Petro basically is not doing that much because he cares about Venezuelan people, but more because he cannot handle another couple of millions of Venezuelans in his country. And Colombia cannot handle that.
Yeah, actually, before moving to Brazil, let's comment on these 2 countries. Do you think it's in their strategic interest to have Maduro as the leader or the new opposition?
You mean Colombia and?
Colombia and Argentina.
I mean, Argentina, not for sure. Milei is from the right. Maduro is a socialist, so it is not possible that Milei would like to have Maduro at the government, and he explicitly stated that also before being elected as the Argentinian president. So for sure not Argentina. About Colombia, I think that neither Gustavo Petro would like to have Maduro, just because Colombia, for the first time after many years, achieved to have a leftist president elected in technically full democracy. And it will be a scandal to support Maduro not elected democratically. So it will do a step back to his position, which is extremely risky for him.
Yeah, it's strange for me to hear Milei perhaps implying that he could intervene militarily because Argentina is on the other side of the continent. So how would that work? It would be a little bit complicated to invade or to attack Venezuela. Colombia is on the border, so I might understand some potential things, but I don't know, Argentina, not really. Tell us about Brazil.
Well, Brazil, I think what Lula wants to achieve is a dialogue with Maduro. He asked the other day in a joint communication with Colombia and Mexico to publish as soon as possible the results, the official results, the one Maduro claimed to have, where he stated as the legitimate elected president, and also asked him to respect the right to protest peacefully, to respect human rights. This is not the first time Venezuela and Brazil had tensions. We remember in the last months when Venezuela wanted to invade Guyana to have to gain that region with a lot of oil. Brazil sent the troops at the border because it feels threatened. So I'd say that Lula, despite being a socialist as Maduro is, just wants to have a peaceful situation in Venezuela, and so also he's supporting Maria Corina Machado, as well as the Chilean president Boric, who has expressly stated that on X. We know Boric is very critical of Maduro. He said that Venezuelan people are suffering. Venezuelan people are in exile because there are a lot of Venezuelans actually living in Europe and other countries in Latin America. And I'd say the only country in the region, and this is to wrap it up about the regional aspect, the only country supporting Venezuela may be, or is actually, because it is true, is Cuba, because the president wrote on X, Nicolas Maduro, my brother, your victory, which is that of the Bolivarian and Chavista people, has cleanly and unequivocally defeated the pro-imperialist opposition. So it's clear that Cuba is in favor of Maduro. And why? Because they are
What a surprise.
yeah, it's not a surprise because they are in the sphere of Russia altogether, with Iran and China as well, who are moving to international scenario, are the ones supporting Maduro.
Yeah, the happy group there of friends. I think South America, just to conclude the regional part, I think South America is very much pieced up in different groups. They're divided. We have those of the right wing, we have those of the left wing, but in general, what I'm seeing as the general willingness of the South American countries is stability. That's what they want. So I think most of them will not push for violent acts. For the international sphere, it's incredibly funny for me because it's basically a circus. We have Russia, who says that Russian-Venezuelan relations have the character of a strategic partnership. Of course, they're against the US, and that's basically the main idea. Then, and I quote, I am confident that your activities at the head of state will continue to contribute to their progressive development in all directions. That was Putin. This military alliance that they could have is kind of weird because there's the US Fourth Fleet really close to that sphere, that regional sphere. And that's one of the biggest, if not the biggest, US fleet. Then we have China, who also congratulated Maduro on his successful re-election. You know, as by the standard of Chinese elections, I guess they're on the same wavelength. And he also said, the leader of China, smoothly holding his presidential election. And yeah, China and Venezuela are good friends, they're partners, and they support each other. So once again, we have, I'm seeing a sort of Cold War in South America.
Yeah, I'd say I call it actually a Cold War per se.
Oh,
As you
sorry,
say.
just to correct myself, it wasn't Xi Jinping who said those quotes. It was Foreign Ministry spokesman Li Jian.
Yeah. Well, as I was saying, I'd call it effectively a Cold War because if you take the tension per se above Venezuela and a potential retaliation of some regional actors like Milei, it's not a Cold War. But then if you include the United States, which are clearly against Maduro, but then there is Russia who comes to his friend Maduro and say, my friend, I'm here with you, I will help you. The same for China, the same for Cuba. Then we find each other back in the post World War II, so in a Cold War, in an effective Cold War. So it's pretty peculiar, this situation, I'd say. But different from the post World War II Cold War, now we have also the European Union as an actor. And the European Union is clearly sided with Venezuelan people who elected Edmundo González. I have read the post of Joseph Borrell, the High Representative, which will be substituted in a bit by Callas, saying the people of Venezuela voted on the future of their country, their will must be respected, there should be transparency in the electoral process, and so on and so forth. And he also defended the legitimate votes at the polling stations, because we know Venezuela. I've heard from a guy living in Venezuela that has a very modern and technological way of voting. They have some specific machines. They are managed by, I think, an American company, where people insert their tickets. And there is immediately, every time there is we can say an update of how the vote is going and so on and so forth. And everything is done, I think, mechanically, or actually I do not know the term specifically, but for sure not digitally. So it cannot be hacked by hackers, as for example Russia or also Maduro said. So I think the European Union also goes in that direction to defend that. And European journalists, for example, our Marco Bariletti from TG1 in Italy, have been every kind of journalist has been expelled. And we came back to the topic when we mentioned about the social media, which Maduro is banning. Why? Well, simply because he does not want to show people what is happening, and he does not want external, and in this case, Westerners, journalists, to show the Western world what is happening, because he is utterly scared of what could happen to him, his family, and so on and so forth.
Yeah. Lastly, for the international part, as we kind of already mentioned, Maduro strategically could contract with the IOs or really with anyone who's willing to do such, give them information, tell them how he could save his butt, basically, and he could go away, political asylum maybe, and have nothing ever happen to him. The problem is, as we know, Venezuela is also a hub for drugs, so they're also going after him if the government falls. It's very much a big hole and a big pile of steaming crap. We hope everything goes peacefully, but again, I think the 6 as a rating for potential civil war could be a good rating. And unless you have something else to say for the international sphere, we could move on to the conclusion.
No, I'd say we are pretty touched everything, every aspect. Obviously, we could talk hours about Venezuela, what is happening, news, hints, and so on and so forth. But we know our time is limited. So I think you correctly mentioned the last part about narcos, which could go against Maduro's government if it will be removed, also because the opposition is clearly against narcos as well. And I would like to conclude about Venezuela with a quick reflection, because I've heard a lot of people, I've read comments also on social media, of how anti-American people, anti-USA people, just because they are against the United States, they say that Maduro is the real leader, is legitimate, and so on and so forth. And this is totally such an, allow me the term, such a bullshit, to defend Maduro and his dictatorship only because you're against the United States. We're not talking about defending the United States here. We're talking about defending Venezuelan people who voted democratically and legitimately for their ruler, for Maria Corina Machado, and actually for Edmundo González. So I don't understand how you can do that.
Yeah. Well, I think that the Cold War that is happening is both domestic and international, because you know there's also the CIA, etc., and other things going on. So I think we can move on to the conclusion. Yes,
absolutely. And this second episode comes to an end. We will keep you up to date in the following weeks about Venezuela, since we expect a lot of things to happen.
For those following us on YouTube, you can see right now a quick summary we made of some other interesting news, which could not be discussed given the time they would require.
Yeah, exactly. And remember to follow us on Instagram and LinkedIn, Network Studenti Sicurezza Italiani, NSSI, plus on our website and podcast platforms, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Music.
Thank you, guys, and remember to always speak your mind.
Thank you.